Beneath the turquoise waters of Florida, a diver named Logan descends into silence, only to find a miracle in despair. A massive sea turtle, her shell scarred and tangled in industrial nets, gasps for life, while her tiny baby refuses to leave her side. Each breath is a prayer. Each movement, a plea for mercy. And as Logan reaches out, blade in hand, something divine stirs in the deep. A reminder that faith doesn't always dwell in churches. Sometimes it swims beneath the waves. The morning light fell soft and golden over the waters of Key Largo, Florida. The sea was calm, its surface gleaming like polished glass beneath the rising sun. Beneath that serenity, in the quiet world of coral and current, I drifted, a solitary diver surrounded by the vast cathedral of the ocean. My name is Logan Reed, 37 years old, once a Navy rescue diver, now a freelance underwater photographer. Life above the surface had grown too loud for me, too full of chatter and ghosts. After a mission went wrong in the Persian Gulf 5 years ago, costing the life of my best friend, I could never stand the hum of crowds or the emptiness of applause. The ocean was the only place that didn't ask questions. It just listened. As I adjusted my camera, light shimmered through the blue like ribbons of silk. Schools of yellowtail snapper brushed past, glinting gold. I framed a shot of a coral shelf, its edges alive with purple fans, swaying in rhythm with the tide. Then, movement. A subtle shift in the water's current. My pulse quickened. From the corner of my visor I saw it. A young green sea turtle, no larger than a backpack, moving hesitantly toward me. Its shell bore faint scratches, and patches of algae clung to its sides like old memories. Its dark, liquid eyes met mine. There was something there, fear, urgency, maybe even recognition. I froze, letting my body rise slightly to show no threat. The turtle stopped a few meters away, suspended in the water, its flippers trembling ever so slightly. Then, as if making up its mind, it turned and swam a few strokes ahead, paused, turned back toward me again. "Are you showing me something?" I whispered through the mouthpiece, though no one could hear. Old instincts kicked in. I checked my compass. Still within safe range of the reef. My gut, honed through years of rescue missions, told me this was no random encounter. The turtle was leading me. I followed. We drifted through a field of seagrass where shafts of sunlight danced like ghosts. The water grew colder, darker, heavier. Something tugged at the back of my mind, that sense before you stumble upon tragedy. I could almost feel the tension of the sea itself, a hush spreading through its veins. And then I saw it. Half buried among tangled fishing nets and twisted coral lay a massive sea turtle, easily 5 feet long. Its shell, once emerald green, was now coated with thick moss, barnacles, and grime. A torn piece of industrial fishing line bit deep into the flesh near its front flipper, staining the water faintly red. The younger turtle darted forward, circling the larger one in tight, anxious loops, releasing short, high-pitched clicks. The sound biologists often describe as distress calls. My heart clenched. I'd seen enough death to recognize its shadow, and it was hovering close here. I swam nearer, careful not to stir silt. My fingers brushed the tangled netting, sharp, oily, unyielding. The material was the same kind used in commercial trawlers, illegal near protected reefs. Rage burned faintly in my chest, tempered by a soldier's precision. I unhooked the knife strapped to my thigh, a titanium blade scarred and dulled from years of service, and began to cut. The fibers resisted, each slice releasing a puff of sediment like smoke underwater. The older turtle flinched once. My movements slowed. "Easy, easy, girl," I murmured. My breath echoed through the regulator, loud and human in a world not meant for it. The small turtle hovered nearby, its flippers brushing my arm as if to help. For a moment I felt absurdly that it understood me. When the last of the outer net snapped free, I touched the turtle's shell gently. It was cold, rough, alive. Then beneath my palm I felt a tremor, a shallow breath, fragile but certain. I exhaled hard, bubbles racing toward the surface like silver coins. Relief washed through me, tinged with disbelief. She was alive, but she wouldn't be for long. The wound near her flipper was deep, and her breathing uneven. I looked at my depth gauge, 40 feet. My oxygen would last 15 more minutes at most. The younger turtle floated before me again, eyes locked on mine, as if pleading. I could almost hear the voice of my old commander in my head. "You can't save everyone, Reed. Sometimes you surface and live to fight another day." But I wasn't that man anymore. I'd left the surface because it never felt like living. I placed a marker buoy near the site and noted the coordinates on my wrist pad. I'd return. I swore it, even if I had to drag every net out of this ocean myself. Before rising, I turned one last time. The little turtle lingered by its mother's side, brushing its flipper gently against her face. There was tenderness in that gesture, the kind that belonged to humans and gods alike. I didn't know it then, but that look, that silent plea beneath the waves, would change everything. The waves had begun to swell, a restless pulse beneath the afternoon sky. Clouds gathered on the horizon like a slow-moving bruise, and the light had dimmed into a somber grey. I could still feel the burn in my shoulders from cutting through the net, my body trembling from adrenaline and cold. Every second felt borrowed. The older turtle's breathing had slowed to shallow, uneven gasps, bubbles rising weakly to the surface. I knew I was running out of time, and so was she. I broke the surface, gasping for air as the wind slapped salt across my face. My small dive boat bobbed violently nearby. The radio crackled in my wet hands as I pressed transmit. "This is Logan Reed," I said, voice strained. "I found a green sea turtle, female, adult, trapped in industrial fishing net near Islamorada Reef. She's alive but critical. I need immediate marine rescue support." For a few heartbeats, only static, then a calm female voice. "Copy that, Logan. This is Coastal Rescue Unit 4. Hold your position. ETA 45 minutes. Those 45 minutes felt longer than any mission I'd endured in the Navy. I floated near the wounded creature, one hand resting gently on her shell, trying to keep her upright as she drifted in exhaustion. The young turtle swam circles around us, sometimes bumping against my arm, sometimes simply floating beside its mother, unwilling to leave. I'd seen loyalty before, in soldiers, in dogs trained for war, but never like this. This was pure instinct, untouched by command or fear. When the rescue vessel appeared, it cut through the dark water like a silent beast. The words "Coastal Wildlife Response" gleamed on its hull. The crew moved with efficient grace. Leading them was Dr. Hannah Pierce, a marine veterinarian in her mid-30s with sharp green eyes and hair the color of driftwood, tied in a hasty bun. Her wetsuit bore patches of old salt stains, and there was a steadiness about her, the kind you only earn after seeing too many dying things. "Show me," she said as soon as she climbed down beside me. We dove together, her movements confident and economical. 2 divers followed, one named Alex Ramirez, a young technician barely in his 20s, dark-skinned with a patchy beard and the kind of nervous energy that never settles. He handled the hydraulic cutters, a tool that hissed with every bite through the net. Hannah moved closer to the turtle's head, her brow furrowing as she examined the swelling beneath its neck. Through her mask, I saw the flicker of worry. She signaled me to hold the turtle steady. Her gloved hand traced along the injured flipper, finding another deep gash. "This isn't just entanglement," her voice came through the comms, low and grim. "She's infected, and something's lodged deep." The water around us shimmered with disturbed silt, turning the scene almost dreamlike. I watched the turtle's eye move sluggishly beneath the film of pain. My chest tightened. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I blinked, she'd slip away forever. After 20 minutes of cutting, the final strands came loose. Hannah gave the signal to surface. The team guided the turtle into a floating sling, a reinforced fabric cradle with air bladders at each end, and slowly hoisted her toward the rescue vessel. The younger turtle followed, paddling desperately beside us. On deck, the air was colder, sharper. Hannah knelt beside the creature, pressing a stethoscope to the leathery skin near her lungs. "Weak heartbeat, low respiration," she murmured. She motioned for Alex to fetch saline and oxygen tubing. Her calmness had the strange power to quiet everyone else's panic. I sat back, drenched and shivering, watching as they worked. The deck smelled of diesel and salt, the horizon swallowed by approaching rain. The younger turtle had somehow managed to climb onto the ramp, resting its small body beside its mother's massive shell. I felt a lump in my throat. "She won't leave her," I said softly. Hannah glanced up briefly, her expression softening. Neither would I. There was silence then, broken only by the hum of the engines as the vessel turned north toward Miami. The sky opened halfway through the journey, rain falling in sheets, drumming against metal and skin alike. I stood at the stern, holding the railing, the cold seeping into my bones. The young turtle swam alongside, its small head breaking the surface with every wave, determined, relentless. Watching it fight against the tide felt like watching faith itself take form. Hannah joined me for a moment, pulling back her hood. Up close, I could see faint lines of fatigue around her eyes, traces of years spent battling the cruelty of human negligence. "They'll take her straight to the rehab center," she said. "If the toxins haven't spread too deep, she might make it." Her tone was factual, but beneath it lay something fragile, hope, cautious and bruised. I nodded, staring into the rain. "If she doesn't, it's on me," I muttered. "No," Hannah said, voice firm but kind. "It's on the world that made her bleed." When we reached the harbor, the dock lights glowed like halos through the storm. The turtle was lifted onto a stretcher and wheeled toward a waiting truck. The small one lingered by the ramp, then turned its head back toward the sea, as if torn between two worlds. I crouched beside it. "Go," I whispered. "She'll find you again." It hesitated, then slipped back into the water, vanishing beneath the waves. I stood there until it was gone, rain mingling with salt on my face. For the first time in years, I felt something crack open inside me. Not pain, not grief, but purpose. I'd spent so long running from the ghosts of war. Now, for reasons I didn't yet understand, the ocean had given me something worth fighting for again. The night had deepened by the time we reached the Miami Marine Rehabilitation Center. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and seawater, that sterile balance between life and the memory of the ocean. I helped the team roll the massive stretcher through a wide corridor lit by humming fluorescent lights. Everything echoed, footsteps, metal, water dripping, as though even the building held its breath. Dr. Hannah Pierce walked beside the turtle, murmuring steady instructions to the staff. Under the harsh light, her calm face looked drawn, the salt of the storm still crusted along her hairline. She didn't look like someone who'd slept in a while. I admired that kind of exhaustion, the kind that meant you still cared. Inside the main treatment bay, 2 new faces waited. One was Dr. Marcus Hale, the senior marine biologist of the center. He was in his early 50s, tall but slightly stooped, with a wiry frame and silvering beard. His eyes, a cool grey, carried the weary patience of someone who'd spent decades watching both nature's beauty and humanity's negligence. "She's an adult female green sea turtle," he said after one glance, voice deep but gentle. "Likely over 100 kilos. Get the scanner ready." Beside him stood Lydia Tran, a young intern no older than 25, Vietnamese-American, petite, quick-handed, her black ponytail swaying as she set up the ultrasound equipment. Her eyes held the restless energy of someone eager to prove herself. I stayed behind the glass partition while they worked. The hum of machines filled the silence, the steady whir of pumps, the rhythmic beep of monitors. When the scanner revealed something irregular in the turtle's abdomen, Hannah's posture changed. "There, she said sharply, pointing to a dark mass on the screen. Marcus frowned. "Foreign object. Could be synthetic material." Within minutes, preparations for surgery began. I caught a glimpse of the turtle's eye as they administered sedatives. Slow, trusting, unaware of the pain ahead. My reflection in the glass stared back at me, salt-streaked face, unshaven jaw, eyes haunted, but alive. I hadn't felt this connected to a living thing in years. The surgery lasted for hours. Through the fogged glass, I watched Hannah's gloved hands move like a conductor's, precise and unwavering. Marcus stood opposite her, eyes narrowed behind his lenses. Lydia handed them instruments with mechanical precision, her fingers trembling only once when a gush of dark fluid spilled from the incision. Then, the moment came. Hannah lifted something from the turtle's stomach, slick and glistening under the light. Even from behind the glass, I could see the imprint of faded letters on it. Marcus laid it on a tray, peeling away residue. "Blue Tide Fishing Co., eh?" he muttered, disbelief curling into disgust. "Still using industrial polymer nets. They were banned years ago." The words hit me like a wave. Blue Tide, eh? I knew that name. Back in my Navy days, their ships had patrolled the Gulf, ignoring every regulation in pursuit of profit. I'd seen their trawlers leave behind dead dolphins, coral torn from the seabed. And now, even here, their ghost had followed me. When the operation ended, Hannah stepped out, removing her mask. Sweat glistened along her forehead. "She made it," she said softly, though her voice carried the fatigue of someone who had fought off death itself. "But the damage from the toxins is severe. We'll monitor her for infection." I nodded, words stuck in my throat. Through the glass, I watched Lydia flush the wound and cover it with a sterile dressing. For a fleeting second, The turtle's flipper twitched, a small sign of stubborn life. Days blurred into weeks. Every morning I returned to the center. I helped feed her with seaweed paste, cleaned the tanks, replaced filters. The young turtle, the same one that had led me to her, was kept in a smaller pool nearby. It often floated near the divider, pressing its head against the glass whenever I passed. I'd tap back gently, an unspoken ritual between us. Dr. Marcus was the kind who spoke little but noticed everything. One afternoon, as I scrubbed algae from the pool's rim, he said quietly, "You've got good hands, Reed. Steady. You ever think about working here permanently?" I shrugged. "Didn't plan much past tomorrow." He gave a knowing smile. "The ones who don't plan are often the ones who end up saving the most." 3 weeks later, things seemed brighter. The mother turtle, we'd started calling her Marina, had begun to move again. Her breathing was stronger, the infection fading, but just when hope had finally taken root, it happened. That morning, Hannah burst into the lab, face pale. "Logan, her blood test. The toxin levels spiked overnight. Her heart struggling." The words sliced clean through the quiet. I rushed to the observation tank. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor was erratic, skipping beats like a dying clock. Marina floated motionless, her massive body rising only slightly with each labored breath. The water around her looked too still, too heavy. My pulse thudded in my ears. I pressed my palm against the glass, whispering, "Stay with me. You've come this far." Hannah worked beside Marcus, adjusting medication, injecting fluids. Lydia read vitals aloud in a trembling voice. "Heart rate dropping. Pressure unstable." Then a long, piercing tone filled the room. The sound of a flatline. Hannah's hands froze mid-motion. Marcus closed his eyes. For one awful heartbeat, the world stopped turning. The sound that shattered the silence was not the end. It was the beginning. The flatline tone stretched for an eternity, and then, as if the ocean itself had refused to let her go, the monitor flickered. A weak, trembling pulse blinked back to life. "She's coming back!" Lydia shouted, voice breaking with relief. Hannah's hands moved quickly, adjusting the oxygen feed, while Dr. Marcus's deep voice cut through the chaos. "Keep her stable, now!" My knees gave out, and I leaned against the glass, breath trembling. I didn't realize I was crying until the salt touched my lips. Marina, the great turtle who had carried the weight of mankind's waste, had chosen to live. The next 72 hours passed in fragments. Sleep became a rumor. I stayed at the center, refusing to leave. Hannah checked on her every few hours, her face drawn but hopeful. She had the kind of strength that wasn't loud, quiet, steady, the kind that kept people alive. One night, she handed me a cup of lukewarm coffee and said, "You know most people don't get second chances. You and that turtle, you're both exceptions." I didn't answer. I just watched Marina through the glass, her flipper twitching faintly with each breath. When morning came, the storm clouds had lifted. Miami's horizon shimmered under new light. Over the next 3 weeks, the transformation was slow but miraculous. The toxins faded. Marina began to move more freely, her shell gleaming under filtered sunlight. The young turtle, we called him Scout, never strayed far, gliding beside her tank, ever watchful. He was smaller, his shell still bright jade, his movements clumsy but determined. A new figure entered the story then. Captain Ray Donovan, the man responsible for overseeing wildlife release operations across the Florida Keys. Ray was in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a sun-weathered face, graying stubble, and the unmistakable look of someone who'd spent half his life at sea. He wore a faded navy cap and a permanent squint, a product of too many years staring into sunlight. Once a Coast Guard officer, Ray had left service after a tragic rescue mission cost him his partner's life, an event that carved both guilt and wisdom into his character. Yet, despite his roughness, there was warmth beneath the surface, the kind of man who'd risk everything for a creature in trouble. Ray arrived at the center on a humid afternoon, clipboard in hand. "So this is our girl," he said, studying Marina with the measured respect of a fellow survivor. His voice was gravelly, like waves rolling over stone. Hannah briefed him on her condition, while I helped Scout swim laps in the adjoining pool. Ray watched me for a while before saying quietly, "You're the diver who found her, right? The one who wouldn't give up." I nodded, unsure what to say. He gave a small grin. "Then you're coming with us when we let her go." The release was scheduled for Key West, where the current ran clean and the seagrass beds stretched for miles. I rode down with the team, Hannah, Ray, Lydia, and a handful of volunteers. The transport truck carried 2 tanks, Marina in the larger one, Scout in the smaller. The rhythmic hum of the road blended with the slow pulse of the water pumps. I found myself thinking about my old life. The missions, the losses, the endless noise, and how strange it was that peace had come to me, not through people, but through the quiet persistence of a sea creature. Key West greeted us with sunlight so bright it hurt. The sea glittered like liquid glass, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. A crowd had gathered near the dunes, local children, a few journalists, environmental workers, even an old man in a straw hat humming to himself. Someone said he was a retired fisherman who'd once hunted turtles but had come today to make peace. Ray gave the signal. The team wheeled Marina's tank down the ramp. The air was warm, filled with the sharp tang of salt and possibility. Hannah knelt beside the turtle, whispering softly, "You're free now, girl." The heavy gate swung open with a click. Marina paused, as if uncertain, then began her slow, powerful crawl toward the sea. Scout followed, flippers slapping against wet sand, his small shell catching sunlight like a gemstone. I stood a few feet away, unable to speak. Every sound around me faded, the waves, the wind, the murmuring crowd, until all that remained was the sight of 2 shapes returning to where they belonged. When the water reached their shells, both turtles stopped and turned. For one suspended heartbeat, their eyes met mine. It wasn't imagination. I swear they recognized me. A silent thank you passed between us, vast as the ocean itself. And then, in a moment so beautiful it felt unreal, they dove. Their bodies rose once more in unison, a leap that sent 1,000 droplets into the air, scattering sunlight like diamonds. The crowd gasped, then cheered. I sank to my knees in the wet sand, laughter and tears mixing freely. Hannah rested a hand on my shoulder, smiling through her exhaustion. "They made it," she said simply. Ray, standing beside her, nodded toward the horizon. "Looks like the sea just forgave us a little today." As the last ripple disappeared, I reached into my bag and pulled out my old diving mask. Scratched, worn, still carrying the smell of salt and oil. I looked at it for a long moment, then tossed it into the surf. It tumbled away, swallowed by the tide. "They'll come back," Hannah said quietly. "Maybe," I replied. But even if they don't, the ocean already did. Miracles don't arrive with thunder or lightning. They come quietly, in the shape of a sea turtle rising back to the light, in the eyes of a man who learns to hope again, or in the waves that keep forgiving us no matter how many times we fail. That day in Key West, when Marina and Scout vanished into the endless blue, I understood something divine. God doesn't only live in heaven, He lives in every act of mercy, every moment we choose compassion over indifference. When we care for the smallest of His creations, we honor the greatest of His commands. Maybe that's how heaven speaks to us, not in words, but in second chances. So if this story touched your heart, share it. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to help us keep telling these true stories of faith, love, and redemption between humans and God's creatures. And as you go on with your day, may the Lord bless you with peace as deep as the ocean and a heart gentle enough to hear the quiet miracles around you. God bless you. And may kindness find its way back to you, just as the sea always finds the shore.